Hangout. I have 0 listeners right now. That's okay. Yeah, it was another set of days off. I'm not gonna go into the details of it. But you know what? Before we get started on anything, let's bring out the opening music. It's not it. This is it.
Signal bleeds
So, hey, welcome everybody to Red Pale Nation Hangout number 478. I'm doing a solo again for the second week in a row. You're probably going to start seeing a lot more of these as I go along. I'm getting very much used to doing these on my own. First of all, I want to just announce where I am located: Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey, MGTOW TV, Brighteon, YouTube, Kick, and Twitch. All the links are down below. I am also at Facebook, Minds, Gab, MeWe, Getter, TLB Talks. There's probably, hold on a second here. There's a whole lot more. I think I mentioned Minds. Yeah, I'm actually at Instagram as well. I just thought I'd throw that in there as well. And also at WordPress as the Roku 5. Yeah, time for me to get a little bit more on track with that. Anyway, so what are the topics tonight? Well, we're going to start out with a little bit of a celebration. I achieved, not on one site, but I did surpass 1,000 subs combined. I'm currently sitting, I think, at about 1,007 or 1,008. I suspect that I am going to also surpass the number that I had when I had my YouTube taken down here. I should potentially, if it's not by the end of this month, it will definitely be in February. Going to be try to be a little bit more consistent. The issues that I've been dealing with for the past 6 months appear to be behind me. I can't say for absolute certain, but yeah, I surpassed 1,000 subs this week, combined, not on one site. Topic number 1, Warhammer 40k stock price plummets in release after Adeptus Custodes. Topic number 3, Starfleet Academy, yet another woke flop for the Star Trek. Boy, was it ever. Topic number 4, going to give you a heads up. There's a lot of video and a lot of commentary because a lot of stuff happened here. They're going to be talking about the Liam Ramos fiasco. We're also going to be talking about Alex Pretti. We are also going to be mentioning the church storming, the one that Don Lemon covered. And last but not least, we will also be talking about the fact that Cam Higby infiltrated the protester signal group. I thought about throwing in the stuff for Maine, but I wasn't sure whether I was going to, what time was going to be starting or whatever. Topic number 5, ex-Olympian and now Mexican drug lord Ryan Wedding caught via, you're going to love this, he got caught via social media. And topic number 6, and probably the one that is closest and nearest and dearest to my heart, is going to be the Playboy article by Magdalene Taylor on Manosphere. Just yeah, I got more than a few things to say about that particular topic. But before we get into it, I'm going to throw in a little something that I found, which I think might just give you some pause for thought here, about the concept of amathea, which is stupid people willfully choosing to be smart people, willfully choosing to be stupid. Sorry. Have a look and just consider.
The ancient Greeks had a word for why smart people believe in stupid things. They called it amathea. It is often translated as ignorance, but that does not quite capture its depth. Amathea is not a lack of intelligence. It is actually intelligent stupidity. The corruption in those who know how to think but refuse to. Socrates believed that amathea was the root of all evil. Ignorance, not the ignorance of not knowing, but the ignorance of not wanting to know. There is only one good, Socrates said, knowledge, and one evil, ignorance. In the dialogues of Plato, Socrates describes men like Alcibiades, educated, brilliant, and utterly lost. Alcibiades was a general and a politician, admired for his eloquence and his ambitions. But Socrates saw something fatal within him, the illusion of wisdom. He mistook cleverness for understanding. He could argue any position, win any debate with anybody, and yet never question himself. That, Socrates warned, is the essence of amathia. It is the blindness of the soul, not of the mind. The philosopher Karl Popper said that the greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, but the illusion of knowledge. It is when intellect becomes a weapon of self-deception, when reason serves ideology instead of truth. That is why otherwise intelligent people believe and do stupid or evil things. They have invested too much of their own identity in being right. And when being wrong could threaten that identity, the mind closes completely like a fist within them. See, amathia cannot be cured by arguments or better data, because it is not a lack of reason. It is a distortion of reason, the corruption of intellect by ideology, ego, and fear. The Stoics later called it disknowledge, a sickness of the soul caused by false beliefs and bad education. It begins not in the brain but in the character of oneself. To admit I might be wrong risks losing who you think you are. So people retreat into certainties, politics, religion, culture, and defend them with all weapons of their own intelligence. They rationalize, they distort, and deceive, but not because they are stupid, but because they are clever enough to make those delusions look rational. In every era, amathia has worn different masks. In ancient Athens, it took the form of political pride. Today, it appears more as digital certainty, a world where information is infinite within us, but true understanding is rare. Socrates once said that no man does evil knowingly, but perhaps the tragedy of our time now is that many do it knowingly and call it good.
Yeah. Food for thought there, folks. Yeah, definitely food for thought there. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of a celebration here. Like I said, I surpassed 1,000 subs this week. Took a little longer than I thought it was going to. That is mostly on me. I will point out here that this particular accomplishment happened because I got my account shut down. I got my YouTube channel taken down by some cowardly little schmuck, probably back at the early part of 2023. I restarted the YouTube, got it up to 9 whole subs, and it happened again. I decided at that point that I was going to move over to Rumble, and I was not going to worry so much about my YouTube account, although this individual did multiple times try and take down my videos, and at points did not allow me to. I was not allowed to post up or whatever. YouTube I suspect it's the same person, but I don't know. I had my Odyssey hacked at one point. I had my BitChute. Oh, you can't really report my BitChute. I had my Rumble reported at one point as well. I have had multiple videos on, in particular, MGTOW TV reported. I had to take down and readjust on multiple occasions. Individually, I suspect within the next 3 to 4 weeks. I'm currently sitting at about 1,007 or 1,008. I don't know the exact number. But when you encounter events like this, you have to remember that it is really important to celebrate the victories and celebrate the wins. And it's also really important that you take personal inventory of where you are and what you're at. I did a personal inventory this week, and the big takeaway that I got from this personal inventory is that I had a lot of bad employers, and I had a lot of bad luck, in particular with my with the vehicle that I work out of. But you know what? If you exclude the financials, the rest of the year, including me working on this particular podcast, have been relatively well successful. And, I wasn't seeing the forest for the trees. And I am going to put this out to all of you that, you might want to consider that, as opposed to focusing in on one area of your life and catastrophizing that particular event. Perhaps maybe look at all of the aspects of your life and seeing how all of them were going, right? Like, for instance, 2025, if I looked at it straight up from what happened with my work and what happened with my car and what happened with my economics, the year would have been an absolute disaster. The year ended up being actually probably one of the better years that I've ever had when I was able to step back and take a look at what was going on in my life and being able to assess it dispassionately and take a look at everything else that was going on and finding out that things weren't really as bad as I thought they would appear to be. I mean, I will get through. I will eventually, and probably in the next week or so, I will probably hit 1,011, which will basically put me past where I was 3 years ago when my YouTube got taken down. You take your wins, you celebrate your wins when you get them, even the small ones. Now, I'm still not making a whole lot of money, and I would definitely, yeah, by the way, yeah, here we go. There's the old Patreon banner. I keep forgetting about that. Yeah, if you want to help me out financially, that's probably the best place to do it. Like and subscribe would also really help. Give it a thumbs up. There's a lot of things that you could probably do to help a guy out, will ya? Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things you could do to help a guy out. But yeah, ultimately, I think what really needs to be brought to attention here is the fact that, I mean, yeah, I hit 1,000 subs. Took a lot less time than it did the first time around. And I'm going to continue to progress in this area. And like I said, to quote an exact source, but here let me just throw this out to you here, because I mean I think this pretty much sums up everything about where I'm at and what I'm doing.
Hi, this is Naroki5. I am going to be doing this until I die or I find something better to do. So please help me achieve this personal and, I think, noble objective by contributing to my Patreon or Subscribe Star. Link is down below. Every little bit helps. Thank you very much.
So yeah, you want to help a guy out, that's probably the best place to do it. Okay, so let's just get into topic number one here, which is right after I timestamp the damn thing. Topic number one. Oh wow, look at that Warhammer 40K. Yeah. Well, this is the day when I have on in particular, we usually end up at some point or another getting into a Warhammer 40K style discussion at some point. Well, Games Workshop seems to, oh, actually, they don't seem to. They actually seem to want to self-destruct and turn on their own audience, despite the fact that they are doing really well. They're doing really successfully. They've got an A-list actor and a major studio backing them on either a movie or a TV series that they're going to potentially be working on. And yet somehow, and it's like literally, you know, to quote somebody that I was listening to this week about Warhammer 40K, it's like the company's own view on their own product, and this is an exact quote from somebody that I get somebody I was listening to, that they're literally, they take the chaos factions view of their own product. Now, at some point, that is probably not going to work out very well for them. At some point, they are going to have to self-destruct. Now, keep in mind, right? One of the other things we'll be talking about tonight is what happened with Star Trek, Star Trek Starfleet Academy. Next week, if the topic seems big enough, I will be discussing the fact that there will not be a third there's not going to be a third Captain Marvel movie. Why? Because get woke, go broke. That's why. There was so much wrong with Star Trek, but we're not talking about Star Trek right now. We're talking about Warhammer. The speculative opinion on Warhammer 40K and about what the company was doing was that Amazon Studios wanted female representation. Now, I got to point out that the Adeptus Assassinorum, the Sisters of Silence, the Adeptus Sororitas, like they've got they've got plenty of female representation in the lore already. They've got some very, very, very strong female characters, and it's like it's not like they're and it's again right the way the Warhammer 40K universe is set up. It's known as the Grimdark, and it's known as the Grimdark for a very good reason. And you know, they didn't want to do that. They wanted to bring in, and I'm not even going to go into the holes in the lore and the reasons why the Emperor decided that he only wanted male male space marines. Yeah, among other things, refer back to the Horus Heresy if you're not familiar with it. Yeah, that would probably be a very good place to start. The whole thing, just, I mean, they wanted female space marines. They didn't get them, so what they did is they decided to go with female Adeptus Custodes, and they decided to double down and say that there were always female Custodes. And it's like, no, there wasn't. They found one obscure little sentence in one book to kind of suggest it. It didn't go down very well. Well, this was the week that the female Adeptus Custodi figures got released. It became official. The net result is that the Warhammer 40K tanked. I'm also going to point out, and Rusin doesn't come around nearly as much anymore, but Rusin has pointed out that BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street all have substantial financial interests in Games Workshop, which explains, and by the way, you will see this pattern repeat itself with Starfleet Academy, which is why the company feuds with its own customers and its own base and its own fans, right? And tries to lie to them and tries to do stuff that just does not work. Now, anybody who's a fan of Warhammer 40K is going to tell you that if you try to wokeify Warhammer and try to make it PC or try to make it same or try to make it PG-13 or whatever, it's not really going to work very well, right? That's not a universe that is going to lend itself particularly well to that type of thing. The four Chaos Gods, Slanesh in particular, a lot of people I can envision having some major, major problems with Slaanesh and how Slaanesh being one of the 4 chaos gods, conducts itself in the writing. Oh, and by the way, never mind the fact that Khorne is just about straight up murder and killing. Fortunately, the Custodes do not. I mean, except in the Horus Heresy, of course, and a couple of other exceptions, because I'm not super familiar with the lore. The Custodes do not play a major part outside of anything based Terra because, well, they are the Emperor's bodyguards, and the Emperor is currently sitting as a desiccated husk on the Golden Throne, if you didn't know that. So, yeah, there is a there's a dearth there. Again, right, I found it very, very ironic, though, that the company, Games Workshop, the company itself, has taken the Chaos's view of the Imperium and literally has the same view of their fans and the people that support it. Now, how long is that going to be? Are they going to smarten up? Are they going to figure out that it's probably not the, because we all know, and again, I will be going into Starfleet Academy here in a probably at some point tonight. I mean, it didn't work very well with Star Trek. Definitely hasn't worked out with Star Wars. Has really done some damage to Lord of the Rings. It's also managed to damage a few other franchises, and it's not like, you know, there's very good reason why there are no female space marines, right? And it's not although again there is actually a Manosphere topic tonight. The last topic of the night, is going to be about about Andrew Tate again. Well, not necessarily about Andrew Tate, but again, she specifically picked a photo of Tate and used it to as an example. Even though, again, right, Tate was only in the United States, I think, at some point last year. I can't remember specifically when. But anyway, the product came out. The product was the product caused the company's stock to tank. Again, Games Workshop is doing well despite this. I'm noticing that they're definitely trying to move away from trying to retcon or change too much about it. Because again, oh yeah, Dungeons and Dragons. There's another one that's been completely ruined. The whole situation is that they try to wokeify, and I mean I've explained this. I've had social justice SJWs like argue to death, and that isn't the case. But I mean, if they try to wokeify Warhammer 40K, or even Warhammer for that matter, there is going, like, the movie. I mean, we've seen this happen before. What's going to happen? Because it happened with Starfleet Academy, right? It will get slagged and put out to dry, hung out to dry by its own fans before the show even comes out. There will be various actors and various, again, reduced mainstream publications that will go out and attempt to insult and belittle and do everything but actually acknowledge that they are part of the problem. That's what's going to happen with Warhammer. The Warhammer TV series or movie will tank. Will tank epically. And that's basically what's going to happen, right? You're free to disagree with me, but it's like, yeah, get woke, go broke is a real thing. And with that, I think I'm kind of done with this topic. I'm going to move on. Oh yeah, Donald Trump and Davos. That's the next topic. Okay, so I do, and by the way, I do have a lot of video content on this show. I do have a video for Donald Trump at making a speech at Davos. Here it is, right here.
I terminated the ridiculous and incredibly wasteful Green New Deal. I call it the Green New Scam. Withdrew from the one-sided Paris Climate Accord and ended the insane and costly electric vehicle mandate. We're going to let people buy the car they want to buy. I declared a national energy emergency, and it's so important, national energy emergency to unlock the liquid gold under our feet and pave the way for rapid approvals of new energy infrastructure. The United States has the largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth, and we're going to use it. Not only will this reduce the cost of virtually all goods and services, it'll make the United States a manufacturing superpower and the world capital of artificial intelligence and crypto.
Okay. Funny when I looked up Donald Trump WEF, that's what I got. I'm not really sure if that's exactly a WEF statement. Donald Trump did go to the WEF though in Davos, and he did read them the Riot Act this week. Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, was there. By the way, there isn't much Canada content this week. The whole thing, the big issue I think that happened for Trump at Davos is, and again, you have to look at what the mainstream media had been saying about this as opposed to how they had been acting. If you had listened to the mainstream media in both Canada and in Europe, you would have been under the impression that Europe was going to throw everything they had, and Canada as well, was going to throw everything they had at Donald Trump to prevent him from taking control of Greenland. If you actually bothered to look at the actual numbers, Canada did not send a single solitary soldier to Greenland. The other NATO allies sent 37 soldiers. They sent next to nothing. They made a lot of noise about sending troops, and they did send them. They didn't send very many. Ultimately, I mean, what you're seeing here in specifically with Donald Trump is you're seeing a return to the Monroe Doctrine. And I believe I covered the Monroe Doctrine on the last show, but here, let me explain what the Monroe Doctrine is. The Monroe Doctrine is essentially the belief that the United States is responsible for the defense of the entire Western Hemisphere, and they consider the entire Western Hemisphere as its sphere of influence. Hence Venezuela, right? Hence Greenland, right? They've also got something otherwise known as strategic reach, which is that its Navy, and not a lot of people outside of government or who are familiar with unless it's explained to you. I mean, I found this out years ago, but it's effectively what it boils down to is that the US considers the trade lanes not just primarily going to and from the United States, but also, going everywhere else in the world. It unless a local navy decides to assume responsibility for the defense of the trade routes, the United States government, and specifically the U.S. Navy, is the prime safeguard or secure of those trade lines. So the United States has direct or indirect military and political control of the Western Hemisphere and trade lines specifically to and from the US, but pretty much everywhere else that cannot be protected by navies locally are protected by the US Navy. Also, what this does too, in this particular point, it all applied with Israel, with cargo ships flowing through that part of Indonesia that's Indonesian waters. The U.S. Navy was escorting vessels that were headed for Israel. They were under basically the protection of the U.S. Navy. So the Indonesian Navy could not without declaring war anyway, go up against the U.S. Navy and stop those ships from trading with Israel. Now, you could say Zog, you could do whatever you want, but I mean, that falls under U.S. strategic reach, which is the belief that anything that occurs on international trade routes falls under the purview and the safety of the U.S. Navy, unless the U.S. Navy dictates, unless some local Navy, like for instance, the trade routes in the Mediterranean and the trade routes in Western Europe and the trade routes around Russia, whatever, and China or whatever, those are protected by their local navies. But the blue sea, which is the deep blue, which is the stuff in international waters, that generally falls under the category of the U.S. Navy. So a deal was worked out, and again, right, I understand that Trump is a bit of a polarizing figure, but I mean, you might not be familiar with this, but I mean, he wrote a book back in the 80s called The Art of the Deal, right? Trump knows how to negotiate. Trump knows how to play the financial game and the political game very well, which is the reason why he is president and why he is able to do things like go out and secure peace deals and get political leaders that would normally not talk to the U.S. are willing to speak with Trump because, and you're seeing when I get to Minnesota, you'll see this. Trump gave Walz and the political leadership in Minnesota plenty of opportunity to do what they did. And it's like, there really wasn't, really hate to say this because there's going to be some people that are going to be upset when I say this. There really wasn't anything that Europe or Canada was going to be able to do to protect Greenland. Like, there just wasn't. Trump did the shrewd negotiation tactic and said he wasn't going to rule out military force. To be honest, military force probably would not have worked particularly well. It would have fractured the NATO alliance. But, Trump being Trump, the art of the deal, and part of the deal is the bluff, right? And that means that when you're negotiating with somebody over territory and you have the military resources to back up what you're saying, it's like, well, no, we won't rule it out. It doesn't necessarily, because there is a whole governmental process that the United States would have had to have gone through to take Greenland. And none of those processes were being brought to bear. Like, you didn't see a massive media campaign, for instance, to take Greenland. There wasn't a big fear campaign. There wasn't a bunch of stories about U.S. ships patrolling off Greenland. There wasn't any of that stuff. There wasn't any attempts to instigate something, right? There's that, because I mean, I've seen this with both Iraq and Panama and how they built that up several months before they actually moved in, and that wasn't going to happen. Now a deal has been worked out. I don't know what that has specifically has been worked out with that deal, but a deal was worked out. As for what's going on in the WEF, well, again, right, I have said this before and I'm going to say this again. Donald Trump is a different wing of the same bird. This is my opinion. What you're seeing with Donald Trump is, again, Monroe Doctrine, Pax Americana style governance. There is an upside to the Pax Americana style government in that they don't want to control what you buy, what you eat, where you go, like 15-minute cities and CBD. Although, by the way, guys, just because Trump's in power, don't discount the possibility that CBDCs might actually still become a real thing, because there's a possibility that they will. That type of thing. I mean, if I have to pick between the two, I would probably go with Pax Americana, just because there's a little bit more personal freedom there, as long as you're not interfering with U.S. business interests. Ultimately, though, and I haven't seen Trump do this without significant. I mean, he's did some stuff at the beginning, and maybe he will again. And it's like they're going to have to make goddamn certain that the person who takes over after Trump is able to potentially move more reforms in. But unless they actually make some serious attempts to make some major reforms, basically, the current economic system kind of starts falling apart. Could be as little as 5 or 6 years. The Pax Americana model will probably last a little bit longer, but it's still like neither one of the two current economic systems is really going to work long term. There's going to have to be a significant altering of how the economies work and how they function. Now, is Donald Trump going to make a move to try to do something around something like that? Yes, he's going to have to probably do it in the next 12 months. Because if the Democrats are somehow able, and by the way, if Democrats do manage to retake the House, there will almost immediately be an attempt to impeach Trump on something, right? So, yeah, if Trump is going to make a move, he's going to have to make a move in the next 12 months. So he's going to have to initiate some major reforms. Again, the elimination of the IRS is probably going to be one of them, and a return to kind of almost like a tariff-based economy as opposed to income tax is probably on the cards. Putting the dollar back on a gold standard, or basing the dollar on something rather than thin air. There's a few things. Returning manufacturing back to the United States, making sure that certain corporate interests aren't able to flood their companies with illegals, which, by the way, is one of the reasons why you're seeing so much virulent opposition to what Trump is doing, because there have been a few companies, especially during the Biden administration, that were definitely enjoying a boost economically from having all of these illegals come in. And so as opposed to what's going on in Davos, he basically went to Davos and read them the Riot Act. Did the message get through? Maybe, maybe not. But ultimately, what it comes down to with the WEF is that you have a bunch of unelected bureaucrats who think that because they're billionaires, they somehow magically know better than to that what everybody needs as opposed to what people actually need. And they're not elected. They're nobody put them in power. They just assumed power, and they just assumed that it was going to go to themselves. Now, is that true for Donald Trump? Or is he just another wing of the same, a puppet? Right? I really don't know. He doesn't appear to be acting like one. But again, right, what he did specifically with Greenland and Venezuela, and what he is doing with Canada right now resembles the Monroe Doctrine and definitely falls under the category of Pax Americana. But with that, I am going to go into topic number 3, which is, oh, look at that. That Starfleet Academy. Oh my God. All right. I will try to not make this as painfully as painless as humanly possible. But remember what I was saying about Warhammer if they decided to go woke? Well, that is exactly what happened with Starfleet Academy. I don't know, and specifically the Critical Drinker was the one who brought up a lot of this. Critical Drinker mentioned it's like, yeah, like regardless of whether you want to accept it or not, like Starfleet Academy is effective. I mean, yeah, okay. Star Trek was always more about hope that the future would somehow be brighter and that people would be a lot happier and there would be a lot of the issues that currently exist now would be in the past, right? And there's also, I remember this very specifically because the guy actually pre-blocked me. There was an individual a few years ago, and yeah, the dude pre-blocked me, and he basically said that Star Trek was always woke. Well, there was a difference between woke and being hopeful, right? And this new Star Trek Starfleet Academy TV series, and they released the first 2 on YouTube, and it didn't go down very well, and people were hoping. I mean, again, Star Trek has had bad or botched starts in the past. Voyager specifically comes to mind. Voyager kind of reeked of political correctness, at least for its first season. And then it fixed itself and became grittier and a little bit more realistic. And it made the show a lot more enjoyable to watch as opposed to what we were watching in the past. And, so I mean, again, they were kind of hoping that maybe 3 and 4 were going to go down. They didn't. They weren't particularly popular, and of course, right, people were letting the producers and the executives at Paramount and the people specifically running the Star Trek universe that was their opinion. And of course, you had the mainstream media or the mainstream sci-fi media come out and do these puff pieces And, you know, going back to, again, with Warhammer, and, it's like, it's, again, without having actually seen any of the Star Trek stuff, I'm only going to be able to go off of what I've been hearing from other people. The consistent matter is that it's like, I mean, one of the most consistent things that keeps coming up is there's two things. One, the way the TV series is written, it's not consistent again, and this is the same issue that they're potentially going to have with Warhammer if they're not careful. It's not only disrespectful to the lore, it's disrespectful to the characters. And the other one is that you've got forced diversity, and you also have characters and individuals, main characters in Starfleet Academy that, in all honesty, are not really. I mean, it's a military organization. You are going to have to engage in military action. Now, you're seeing a female Custodes on the screen right now. Like, regardless of what you think of the female Custodes, they actually did do the female Custodes right. I mean, she was going to be a genetically enhanced super soldier, and they're going to make her like a genetically enhanced super soldier. And it's like, no disrespect, but a portly 5'2" cadet is not it's not going to be particularly physically intimidating against, say, some of the like, a lot of the races in Star Trek tended to be a little bit, tend to be extreme examples of human characteristics. But again, right? Like, take a look at the black woman with that. Like, who the hell puts their hair that way? Well, I mean, that wouldn't even be military regulation. And, of course, once it started coming out, then you started getting some of the actors, and you started getting also some of the producers. And, yep, you might want to sit down for this one. Shocker. Oh, shocker. They started getting into a battle with their fans. They started to, yes, they did. Yes, they did. They started out with the insults, insulting their fans, calling them names or whatever, as opposed to actually, looking at the product, seeing where they went wrong and fixing it. There's supposed to be 2 seasons. They botched it so badly that, I mean, they're going to have to go back to, and again, Star Trek has done this in the past, right? Look at the first season of Voyager, season 1, season 2 of Voyager specifically comes to mind, right? Where they fixed it, and because they fixed it, they actually turned it into a very, very interesting and challenging series, in particular in regards to the Borg. And, that ended up being very critical, because I have to also keep in mind here that what also happened with Voyager and DS9 is that Babylon 5 came out, and Babylon 5 was definitely not woke. And it took a very darker, grittier, conspiratorial, political edge to its content, as opposed to, say, DS9. And people began going over to Babylon 5, current speaker included, preferred watching Babylon 5 to DS9. Now, DS9 did eventually get my loyalty back, but I mean, again, I was watching both of them for a while. But again, like, is there going to be that same type of pull for Starfleet Academy? Like, episodes 3 and 4 did not redeem the show, right? Having the executives and having the mainstream media, and they keep doing this, they keep rolling out the same tired insults and the same tired excuses and the same tired insults to their own fan base, right? And you know what's going to eventually happen is that like Star Wars, Star Trek, one of these series is just gonna go the way of the dinosaur for a decade or two. Or and let's not even talk about Doctor Who. Like a couple of those series are gonna just die for 10 or 15 years. And they're going to get replaced by something that is a little bit more appropriate. Given the current situation that's going on, Warhammer is definitely front and center for this. There's also a few other gaming systems out there that I think would probably make for very good TV series. SCP Foundation, Shadowrun. Like, there's a few out there that although maybe it's not my personal favorite. I understand a lot of people are very, very partial to Trench Crusade. That's not one of my personal favorites. But I mean, like, I understand that there's a lot of support for Trench Crusade. There's a few game systems out there that will fill in the gap. That won't. Well, I mean, for one, it's like specifically with both SCP and Warhammer. You can't wokeify those two game systems. Like, it's just not really physically possible to wokeify those two game systems, those two worlds. And again, right, what's going on with Star Trek is tragic and unfortunate, and I would like Star Trek to turn it around. They're not as damaged as Doctor Who or Star Wars or Lord of the Rings. They're not as badly damaged as us. They might be smart enough to turn it around. Like, you are seeing, for instance, like there is not going to be a third Captain Marvel movie, right? Like, Ironheart is not going to be, like, Ironheart's dead, right? Like, there's slowly but surely this group of people that brought in this woke bullshit are being phased out of Hollywood. The question is that are they going to do it fast enough? That's the question, right? In the meantime, even though I have literally seen every single episode of TNG, Voyager, DS9, and the original Star Trek, I mean, I will still occasionally watch those shows. And Next Generation is still one of my personal favorites. Do you like Picard? Do you like Kirk? The ultimate geek question. On a fundamental level, I'm going to go with Kirk. But I mean, it's like, that's kind of like comparing apples to oranges, right? Again, right? Let me just throw this photo up just for a second here. Like, take a look at those two behind Picardo. I can't remember who Robert Picardo is playing, so I'm just going to name him by his actor's name. Like, those two characters are not soldiers. They're not built like soldiers. They don't act, again, right? I have to go on secondhand stories here. They're not acting like soldiers. The storytelling is apparently quite weak. Again, I haven't looked at it, so I really cannot say specifically that it's bad because I don't know. Right? And But with that, though, you know, sorry, Paramount. Maybe the next Star Trek series will be a lot better. I do enjoy the more hopeful, upbeat take on humanity that Star Trek has. And I mean, but here's the problem is that it suffered a major brain drain after Weinstein, and a lot of these people have never come back. And the reason why they haven't come back, there's multiple reasons why, and as a result, what you're getting is you're getting stuff like this. You're getting stuff like Starfleet Academy, and it's kind of unfortunate, right? Because it's like watching all of the franchises that you enjoyed as a kid or as a teenager or as somebody even in the early 20s who still would watch a lot of Star Trek, right? It's really kind of tragic to see it go the way it's gone. And, you know, I think Starfleet Academy deserves a second season. Maybe they'll fix it. I'm not very hopeful. But again, right, I got limited time and I don't feel with my limited time like watching woke fucking crap. I don't. I don't. I just don't. So, yeah, with that, we're going to go on here to topic now. Oh, yeah, this is the Minnesota section. Oh, wow. Okay. Just giving you all a serious heads up here. There is a lot of video content and a lot of stuff to cover in the Minnesota section of this. And it's going to be, I'm going to have to break this up into various parts. But the first section on this is, of course, the Liam Ramos debacle. And yeah, I don't actually have anything about Liam Ramos. How did I find out about Liam Ramos, though? How I found out about Liam Ramos through the I found out about Liam Ramos through the believe it or not, Jessica Alba posted up something on her page, and it was like, what? And of course, right, Jessica Alba being a fucking Hollywood idiot, I knew in my heart of hearts, I knew that I was gonna have to go and double check every single thing around the Liam Ramos situation. You might notice that they've stopped talking about Liam Ramos almost. They again, right? There is now an independent media, and the independent media is able to get out the other story. And again, right, the advertising revenue, like the alt media and the mainstream media are almost on the same foot now, right? And it's not that the alt media and the independent media is any more moral or superior, because I mean, yeah, there have been some cases where the alt media has dropped the ball, but I mean, almost immediately, right? It became like the story is that the ICE was using this 5-year-old boy as bait for the father, and of course, they didn't bother to mention the fact that the father actually abandoned the boy and ran off. And, ICE is not just going to leave a 5-year-old boy out in the middle of nowhere with nowhere to go and no one to look after. And so, they they had to take the 5-year-old and put him under their protection. He was not being used as bait. the dad, the father, abandoned the kid, right? And this is you're seeing this pattern over and with consistency. You're seeing this pattern happen over and over and over and over and over again, where they really seem to want to create an incident. And the whole thing is just, they got caught in a lie, and they also got caught in a lie, a lesser lie with Alex Pretti. But we won't get into Alex Pretti next. But I mean, again, right? They tried, it failed, and they just dropped it and they moved on. And I'm just gonna put it out to you right now. The fact that they even tried to do this and they got caught and they basically just tucked tail and ran kind of tells you about what type of people. And again, someone was actually stupid enough to, again, right, this group of woke idiots. By the way, they only have like 15 to 20% support overall, nationally, for what they're doing in Minnesota at this particular point in time. They don't have majority support for it. And, there's but yeah, I had to throw in the Liam Ramos thing here just because, right? I'm going to be posting up here in about 30 seconds. I'm going to be posting up one of the photos that they used. Yeah, oh yeah, it was special. Like they created unique artwork and tried to pull off all sorts of stuff here. It'll be up in about 9 seconds here. I'll just show you what it was, how badly they got. Okay, here it is. There it is. Yeah. Yeah, he's a 5-year-old kid. He wasn't involved. His dad abandoned him, and you have not seen anybody in the mainstream media admit that. Fortunately, there is an alt media, and that will become very, very obvious as I cover this Minnesota stuff. And by the way, we are going to be on the Minnesota stuff for a while. So anyway, with Liam Ramos out of the way, let's go into the next topic, which is Don Lemon and a key. I can't remember what her name is, but she got arrested. Nikema Armstrong. I have 5 videos on this. So yeah, you bear with me. This is going to probably run for a while. So here we go. We're going to do Don Lemon outside the church for Project Pull Up. It's very obvious that Don Lemon knew about this ahead of time, by the way, and that he was actually cooperating with this protest, which was basically done by Nikema Armstrong in protest of the fact that one of the members of this particular church just so happened to be a member of ICE. That was their logic and their rationale for doing this. But anyway, yeah, so let's just run through all of these and you'll get a bit of a story. So here we go.
Into Minneapolis a little bit ago and did some reconnaissance on the ground, speaking to an organization there that's gearing up for resistance and protest. I've been pleasantly surprised to see the community coming together. Diverse community. If you see this, when we first pulled up, we're like, wait a minute, which operation are we at? And as it turns out, because we were like, well, this is kind of MAGA coded, right? Saw the American flag or whatever, but these are resistance protesters. They're planning an operation that we're going to follow them on. I can't tell you exactly what they're doing, but it's called Operation Pull Up, and it's Nikema Armstrong, and she has been doing this since George Floyd, Dante Wright, and others, where they surprise people, catch them off guard, and hold them to account. And so that's what we're doing here. And then after we do this operation, you'll see it live. And these operations are surprise operations. Again, can't tell you where they're going.
Yeah, we all knew where they were going. They were going here.
Justice for Grenada! 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 We need justice! We need justice!
Yep, and then of course this.
What do you think of this?
I mean, this is unacceptable. It's shameful. It's shameful to interrupt a public gathering of Christians in worship.
But there were folks who will say,
I have to take care of my flock.
okay, but listen, we live there's a constitution and a First Amendment to freedom of speech and freedom to assemble and protest.
We're here to worship. We're here to worship Jesus because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world is Jesus Christ.
I want to be very respectful. Please don't push me, though.
We're here to worship Jesus.
Yes.
That's why we're here. Yeah. Okay, that's why we're here. Okay. That's what we're about.
Don't you think Jesus would be understanding
we're about
and love these folks?
We're about spreading the love of Jesus.
But did you try to talk to them as a Christian?
No one is willing to talk.
Okay.
I have to take care of my church and my family, so I asked that you actually would also leave this building.
You don't want us to chronicle what happened?
Unless you're here to worship.
I'm always worship. I'm a Christian.
We're here to worship. Yeah. We're here to worship. Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And the next one. Yep, guess what? She got arrested. Nikema Armstrong.
Remember that
got
church
arrested.
incident on Sunday in Minneapolis? The AG Pam Bondi posted this, all right? I'm reading now. Minutes ago at my direction, HSI and FBI agents executed an arrest in Minnesota. So far, we've arrested Nikema. So far, okay, we'll come back to that. So far, we have arrested Nikema Levy Armstrong, who allegedly played a key role in organizing the coordinated attack on City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota. We will share more updates as they become available. Listen loud and clear. We do not tolerate attacks on places of worship, end quote. I want you to react to that, Paul. But on Monday, Tricia McLaughlin was on with Dana and me. And part of her answer said, I think we will be seeing mugshots very soon. She was tipping her hand that arrests were on the way, and this is the first one that's been made.
Yeah, and, look, there's going to be very, very little that they can do in defense of this because it's on film, and for once, they didn't cover their faces. Now, here is the thing that's going to come out of this. You have her under arrest. Now you're going to get the communications. And this is where it starts to spider web out. You start to see who was talking to who showed up in regard, including Don Lemon. How much did they all know going in? That imports things like conspiracy charges, which can be quite heavy. There's criminal civil rights charges that are implicated in the church incident.
This is also because one of the things that we found out about that was that they were targeting them.
And of course, the perp walk, which I had through. Yeah, she's not happy. Fuck her. Not literally, but she's not particularly happy, and I'm glad that she's not particularly happy. I'm going to just say it. It looks almost as if they went to that church just because they could. Yeah, that's kind of what it appears to be to me, is that they just went to that church just because they freaking could. And it's, when you're getting, because like, who was this person who was this ICE person who was working with the church? Like, what was the purpose behind that? Were they actually trying to make a point, or were they just basically going in there and disrupting a church service? And keep in mind here, I'm an atheist. I don't have an investment in protecting churches or church property. The churches, and by the way, you will also notice that there, for the most part, there's not a major African American element in these protests that are going on. Also, and what he was saying there in that second to last video about exposing the network, right? Like, did this church event play a factor in Cam Higby being able to access the network afterwards. And that is something that's going to be really, that's something that's I think is going to be probably discussed quite a bit here, because it's like, yeah, that church event was quite clearly a mistake, right? And by the way, I haven't downloaded any of the, because I mean, I could make a show just on Minnesota and what's going on in Minnesota right now. And, you know, the big, ultimately what, and when I get further down the road, like you'll see this, it's like, you know, the majority of the violence is happening in 9 places. And, you know, and people are again, being talked about in the independent media, not being talked about in the mainstream media. The doubling down that Tim Walz and the mayor of Minneapolis and the attorney general in Minneapolis did this week. If they're involved in this, you know, if they're involved in the massive levels of corruption that have been occurring inside Minnesota, right, then that would explain the chronic need to double down and the chronic need to continue ramping up the violence and the rhetoric that is taking place in Minnesota, because it's an obvious distraction. By the way, another person has suggested there was a bunch of stuff that was released apparently on Ghislaine Maxwell, which I didn't really get into following very much. But I mean, yeah, there was a bunch of stuff on Ghislaine Maxwell, and that was released, and some people were like saying, oh, well, all the stuff in Minnesota is a distraction from that. I think there's probably bigger fish to fry. Right. I'm going to lean into the fact that there was massive fraud, and that that these protests and their constant ramping up of the protests involved is an attempt to distract away from the big picture, which specifically involves the issue around the around the massive fraud, around the Somali fraud. It's like, again, like 90. I didn't download the video, but my understanding is 94 of the 98 people that have been charged so far with the fraud are of Somali origin. And I gotta keep bringing this up, right? It's like, just remember, had Tim Walz and Kamala Harris won the election, this level of fraud would have occurred all across the United States and probably all across Canada as well. You know, just, you know, gonna throw that out there just so that people know that that's a possibility here. It's like, yeah, like, let's not just dismiss that out of hand. So, yeah, so the next one, oh, look at this, Alex Pretti. Okay, now this one, I couldn't find an actual direct, although there was a very short incident where, you know, Alex Pretti, and I got to point this out, Alex Pretti was armed with when we went to this event. There's a lot of video stuff to cover about that. I'm just going to play all of the video content, and there is a lot of it. Like, a lot of it. So let's start out with this one right here.
Here's my response on the shooting as a former law enforcement officer. To me, it's very clear. There's a scenario where it's justified, and there's a scenario where it's not justified. And I lean more towards the justification scenario. And this is, I'm going to give you a very clear synopsis why. I'll start with the unjustification. The only way that'll make this not justified in a shooting with this ICE agent or Border Patrol agent is if he saw the gun being removed knew that the idiot suspect was unarmed and shot him anyway, that's not justified. And he's going to be prosecuted. And he should be prosecuted. Now, the more likely scenario is that you got a guy fighting with them. A firearm is exposed to some degree, either by visual exposure or by them saying he has a gun. Now, it appears to me when I watched the video that it does not appear that the agent saw the gun being removed. And therefore, when the guy is posturing up, he hears gun. The guy goes and reaches somewhere in his waistband that the agent reasonably believed that he was still a threat with a gun in his possession. Now, let me add this. In no scenario is the idiot that was a nurse going and protesting, there's no scenario where he's justified. When you have a CCW, a concealed carry permit, it was articulated in the class, and as a person with reasonable common sense, you shouldn't premeditate a felony crime while in possession with a firearm. You don't go to a scene to harass ICE agents, harassing them in the middle of the street, deciding to use force against them. They literally was pushing a lady out the side of the road because she was interfering with their investigation. And he came and got physical with the Border Patrol agent, knowingly with a firearm in his possession, without disclosing whatsoever to the agents that he had a firearm, which is another reasonable thing to do if you conceal carrying and you're confronting or getting in a physical altercation with Border Patrol agents. At some point, you should tell them you got a gun on you. Because what happens when the fight is on and now a gun is in play? You can get shot inadvertently, unintentionally. And I want people to understand it doesn't matter that he was armed or unarmed when he got shot. The only thing that matters, if you guys have any common sense, is whether or not the Border Patrol agent who shot him knew that he was unarmed. And there's a reasonable belief that if you're fighting a person, people are saying gun. You got other agents dispersing, and you see the guy kind of reach for his waistband. It's reasonable to believe that he was in possession of a firearm and going to use that firearm against other agents. So him getting shot will be justified in the court of law. Anybody with common sense that watched the video, I mean, I don't say common sense. Common sense don't matter in this situation. It's really you need to have a background in law enforcement and understand the use of force policy. Anybody that have a background in law enforcement and understand use of force can look at that and say, oh, it's very clear. One or two ways this is going to go. If he knew the guy was unarmed and he shot him, an unarmed man who wasn't a danger to anybody, then of course it's not justified. But from looking at the video and his behavior, mannerisms, how dynamic things were going on, it appeared that nobody really saw him remove the gun from the guy's waistband. And therefore, they were under the impression when there was gun, that he had a gun in his possession, and he went and reached for his waistband where he previously had the gun, ended up getting smoked like a brisket. And I'll say this to end this. I don't care. That's what you get. In no scenario on planet Earth do I think it makes any sense for somebody to go and do what he did. It makes no sense to chase down ICE agents or Border Patrol agents and blockade them with your car. And then when you get in a confrontation, they tell you to get out the car, you pull off and hit one of them. Logically, that makes no sense. I would never in my life, unless I was expecting to have an armed confrontation with federal agents or local police, would I go to a place and antagonize and become physical with law enforcement knowing I have a gun on me. Now, if you're doing it and you know you're going to get into a shootout, then and when you die, that's on you. But don't play the victim when you came out there looking for trouble and you found it.
And, of course, the Megyn Kelly response.
I know I'm supposed to feel sorry for Alex Pretti, but I don't. I don't. Do you know why I wasn't shot by Border Patrol this weekend? Because I kept my ass inside and out of their operations. It's very simple. If I felt strongly enough about something the government was doing that I would go out and protest, I would do it peacefully on the sidewalk without interfering via a whistle, via shouting, via my body, via any other way, I would make my objections known by standing there without interfering, because interfering is where you go south. And laying hands on a police officer trying to, or border patrol officer or ICE officer trying to conduct a law enforcement operation is a felony. And now you are going to get arrested. And if you do anything that resembles resisting, you're in serious trouble. Doesn't.
Yep. Okay. Let's just break this down because there's a lot that went wrong. One, Mr. Pretti, this dude right here, Mr. Pretti showed up with a gun and 2 extra clips of ammunition. B, and I'm going to put 1A, is the fact that there was a mainstream media and the local leadership that was encouraging and ramping up the rhetoric to a dangerous point. 3, you had, and by the way, I haven't even gotten into the Cam Higby stuff yet. You had clearly and this is when I get into Cam Higby, this will become really obvious. There's a clear coordinated effort here going on to have as many people show up and make as much noise as humanly possible. You have a very chaotic environment. 3, you had a woman go up and try to actually get physical with a border patrol agent. That was 3. 4, Mr. Pretti should have just at that point stepped aside and let that play out, and he chose not to do that. Instead, he tried to be the white knight, and it ended up going really badly. 3, at no point, and again, it's kind of hard to hear because there's a lot of noise and a lot of stuff going on in the background. At no point does he inform said agents that he is armed, which, by the way, is gun safety 101, and in particular, when you are dealing with law enforcement. I actually had somebody online argue that with me. You know, it's not required by law, but I mean, if you want to keep breathing, it's probably a good idea to let people know, yeah, I have a gun, I'm armed, I'm going to stand down now, right? Again, I placed a video from a guy who was a professional protester who said, it's like, yeah, you know, when they decide to arrest you, you just let them arrest you and you let the courts figure it out, right? Don't worry about anything beyond that. 3, he started to struggle, and he started to struggle quite a bit. And at one point, he continued to flail around, and it looked like at one point he was attempting to go for the gun, which had been removed at that point. And, you know, but the officers that were restraining Mr. Pretti didn't know that. You know, then the next one, then 2, 3, 4. I can't remember. I've lost total. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, number 5. The gun was removed. Now I have seen a video, which it looks like, because apparently the gun that Mr. Pretti has is prone to just going off on its own, right? So it looks like it might have gone off on its own and may have triggered the agents to basically fill up Mr. Pretti full of lead. And that's kind of where it went down. The agents in this particular case are not completely innocent, but again, you know, once again, the mainstream media and a bunch of idiots in Hollywood and the wokesters tried to run with a narrative, and they got a little ways out. And then because there's now an independent media that is able to counter the narrative that they're attempting to push, it didn't get very far. And it didn't get very far because, again, right, the alt media, and this is something that I think is probably why you're potentially going to see the Democrats, especially if they do somehow get back control of the House and the Senate and the legislative branch of government in 2026, you're going to see them make a major push to try to put restrictions on the alt media and to really start going after sites like the one you're currently watching on, probably, or BitChute or Odyssey or MGTOW TV or Brighteon or Kick or Twitch or some of the other ones that you're looking at, because it's like, yeah, it's kind of hard to keep pushing a narrative when your narrative just can't really get any legs because there's an alt media there to go, no, that's not what happened, right? That is not what happened. This is what happened. This over here, this thing right here, this is what happened, not what the mainstream media said. I, by the way, have had to remove friends from my friends list on social media because they've been posting up and grandstanding about this stuff. And, if you want to, it's like, again, you remember that video that I put up right at the very start of the show, the one about Amathia? That's the reason why I put that particular video up at the start. You are knowingly, ironically enough, you are knowingly seeing smart people making in power, by the way, making very bad decisions and attempting to push a narrative to cover up for gangsters, pedophiles, professional criminals, domestic abusers, robbers, thugs. I could go on and on and on and on and on. And that is what they're doing in ICE. And they're doing it at a coordinated level, by the way. They're not just doing this. This is not just where an event occurs and all of a sudden there's just a bunch of people that just happen to come by and they all just collectively get outraged, which is kind of almost what they're attempting to push here. It's not. It's a coordinated thing. And when I get to the Cam Higby section, which, by the way, there's a shitload of video for Cam Higby, just letting you know ahead of time, man, there's a ton of video for Cam Higby, but there was a series of mistakes, my understanding, and again, I won't be covering this until 479, but apparently Trump has worked out some type of a deal. The mainstream media is attempting to play this off like it's some type of a major win. It's not. A deal was worked out between Trump and Walz, but I'm not going to discuss that until next week. But again, right, like the lie was there, right? And again, right, both of these incidents happened very close to each other and only a few days apart. And also, right, the big issue here is the fact that, they keep, up until probably this weekend, don't know why Trump has not done anything about the Insurrection Act yet. Again, right, kudos to Trump for staying as patient as he actually did. All right, so now I've got some really interesting stuff to show you because, now we're getting into the Cam Higby stuff. There is a lot of it, okay? And there's probably going to be a fairly long discussion about Cam Higby after the fact, just letting you know. But there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 1, 2, 3. There's 6, 7 videos. There's quite a bit of stuff here. So yeah, first two are from Cam about Cam Higby. Have a look, man. This is really interesting stuff.
An Olympic snowboarder is now being described by the FBI as the modern.
Come on.
An Olympic snowboarder is now being described by the FBI as the modern-day Pablo Escobar, and he's still on the run. Today, an Olympic snowboarder...
No, that's not it. All right, that's the wrong one. This is the one.
Cam Higby just exposed the Signal group chat that all these protesters in Minneapolis have been using to communicate with each other. I know many of us have always thought it's so strange how these people can just flock to all these different locations in the city so fast. The left tries to say it's like organic. Oh, they're just showing up for their community. This is literally just names of people in this chat. Hundreds of names of people communicating with each other. Like, it just keeps going. Like, right here, we're only at K right now. This is how many names are in this list. They have these little symbols next to their name in this chat to show what they do in this movement. So you have license plate checkers, dispatch, mobile patrol. Here they have an actual place where you can put in people's license plates that you suspect could be ICE. If you see a vehicle that just happens to look like an ICE vehicle, you can put it in, and a bunch of other protesters will see it eventually and just harass the shit out of them. One of the last things he showed was this message saying, home base is expecting me. He was not able to figure out what home base is, and I don't think anyone else has either. But this really just shows how organized these people are. I've said it before and I'll say it again. These people clearly either have no jobs and just live off the government, or they're getting funding from somewhere to be able to do all of this. Trump really needs to look into where that funding is coming from.
Next one.
Hey, remember when Charlie Kirk got shot and people realized that Google Analytics has a feature you can use to see what people have searched around an event, and that
Not that one, this one.
Yesterday, investigative journalist Cam Higby began releasing information obtained after infiltrating the Minneapolis ICE Watch signal chat conversations. And the information that he has found and released to the public is absolutely incredible. He began by releasing screen recordings of their members list, and investigators over on X have been taking that list and researching who these people are when they've decided to use their real names. We're talking about local politicians, we're talking about national journalists, and yes, even people connected directly to Governor Walz himself. Local politicians like Audrin Chowdhury, a St. Paul City Council member, and at the state level, people like Brad Tabke, a Minnesota state representative. Sergio Martinez, a national correspondent for NPR. Hwa Jong Kim, another St. Paul councilwoman. Others have also been identified. Local politician David Snyder has been identified as one of the admins in the anti-ICE signal organization. Minnesota state candidate Anita Smithson, also identified as a dispatcher. And it is now believed that this person, Amanda Noel Kohler, may in fact be the ringleader of what appears to be a very sophisticated, very well-funded, organized crime operation. And here she is smiling with Governor Twinkletoes Sparkle Fingers as a political strategist for his campaign. You know who else is found in these signal chat conversations? Renee Good and Alex Pretti, two people who have lost their lives when conducting domestic terror tactics under the supervision of this organization. So what else did Cam Higby discover? Well, it appears as though they have direct access to the National License Plate Identification Network, which can only be obtained with cooperation through law enforcement or somebody embedded in law enforcement that has access to that database. They also know the exact timing and movements of law enforcement and shift changes, information that can also, again, only be learned when you have people embedded in law enforcement. So you've got local politicians, you've got national media, you've got coordination with local law enforcement, and you have a connection directly to the governor's office. So now I understand why the Department of Justice has been demanding records through subpoenas to a grand jury of St. Paul, Minneapolis, the governor's office, the attorney general's office, and the mayors of those two cities and local prosecutors. Does the Department of Justice already know the detailed level of sophistication this organization is operating under? And are they looking for additional information so that they can start making arrests? And just think about it. All of this organization, all of this money, all of this insurrection, simply because one person walked into a state and found billions of dollars of fraud.
Next one.
Protests are supposed to be organic. They're meant to be for the people, by the people. They are not meant to be organized by opposing parties, leaders, or funded by tax dollars or foreign governments. or enemies of the state, because that would be insurrection, collusion, intent to violently overthrow government authority, which is what the Democrats in Minnesota have done. The Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, Peggy Flanagan, is one of the admins in the Signal chats. We also have Tim Walz's former campaign advisor, Amanda Kohler, in there. If you are not on X, you do not know about Signalgate. As independent journalist Cam Higby has infiltrated these group chats that have hundreds of people, and they are very well organized. These protests are not protests, they're organized crime groups. They have shifts and job responsibilities and patrol zones. They undergo training, which who is paying for? They have a license plate database and tag and follow cars, and if they believe a car is ICE, they have a protocol in place where they all go harass and block ICE from doing their jobs, impeding federal operations. They have a dispatch call. They have people clocking in and out. Local police might be in on it. They have a home base. Like, this is seriously organized crime, not protests. It's conspiracy to overthrow the government for something that we, the people, overwhelmingly support, by the way. Trump won the election on secure borders and deportations. It's an 80-20 issue, but the Democrats need to change that. They need to manufacture this crisis because they have to open the borders to import voters. And they manufacture these types of riots every election year. And they use people that are easily manipulated as pawns. The goal of these riots, every time, the Democrats are hoping that someone gets shot. They are looking for a martyr, and they don't care who it is. It's why they're continually urging their base to escalate things. They're playing on their emotions to get what they want, which is optics, which is to further mass manipulate the public so that they win elections. It's their playbook. And it's not the first time they've done this. Their protests have always been well-organized crime groups with foreign influence and corrupt funding. And if you're not on X following Nick Sorter and Cam Higby and the Data Republican, you wouldn't know that. The truth is important. Our country is important. And this is a group of people actively working against our country.
Couple more. Here we go.
You are definitely going to want to see this. It's about who's really responsible and behind this young man here losing his life in the Minneapolis shooting. I'm going to roll this clip. Pay very close attention. Save this. Hit the follow button. Comment. And let me know what you guys think. Here it is.
I'm your Common Sense Gay, and today we had yet another tragic shooting encounter between a man and ICE. Let me tell you who's responsible. It is activist organizations like the Solution Project, headed by Mark Ruffalo. And now I have found out Defend 612 is also tied to members of the Minneapolis city government. They are militarizing people like him to go out and obstruct law enforcement. Let me tell you something. If you were blowing whistles and surrounding cop cars and had a gun, the same thing would happen with police officers. We've talked about Defend 612 before and how they are funded and have a financial sponsor of the Cooperation Cannon River Project, which is basically a shell corporation which receives money from the Solutions Project, which is headed by Mark Ruffalo. They put out documentation like this, making people mini ICE cops, I guess. This is what I'm saying. You're putting civilians in harm's way and militarizing them. Here you have the instructions of what to bring when you're on an ICE patrol, including your whistles, which you will hear in all of these videos. And all of this documentation refers to the people participating in this as observers. Let's listen to the video of the encounter that happened today. We're not listening to the full thing. We don't need to see it again. But let's see what the other protester or observer said. Notice the whistles, the chaotic scene. They are hurting the observer. They all speak the same language that is in these documents. These documents, I can tell you, were created by a large organization, like the Solutions Project.
I know I'm supposed to feel sorry for Alex Pretti, but I don't.
You are definitely going to want to see this. It's about who's really responsible and behind this young man here losing his life in the Minneapolis shooting. I'm going to roll this clip. Pay very close attention. Save this. Hit the follow button. Comment. And let me know what you guys think. Here it is.
I'm your Common Sense Gay, and today we had yet another tragic shooting encounter between a man and ICE. Let me tell you who's responsible. It is activist organizations like the Solution Project, headed by Mark Ruffalo. And now I have found out Defend 612 is also tied to members of the Minneapolis city government. They are militarizing people like him to go out and obstruct law enforcement. Let me tell you something. If you were blowing whistles and surrounding cop cars and had a gun, the same thing would happen with police officers. We've talked about Defend 612 before and how they are funded and have a financial sponsor of the Cooperation Cannon River Project, which is basically a shell corporation which receives money from the Solutions Project, which is headed by Mark Ruffalo. They put out documentation like this, making people mini ICE cops, I guess. This is what I'm saying. You're putting civilians in harm's way and militarizing them. Here you have the instructions of what to bring when you're on an ICE patrol, including your whistles, which you will hear in all of these videos. And all of this documentation refers to the people participating in this as observers. Let's listen to the video of the encounter that happened today. We're not listening to the full thing. We don't need to see it again. But let's see what the other protester or observer said. Notice the whistles, the chaotic scene. They are hurting the observer. They all speak the same language that is in these documents. These documents, I can tell you, were created by a large organization, like the Solutions Project. Leave it to the liberals. Someone always has a big mouth. Dan Engelhardt of the Park Board has a project called Defend 612. So I went to look him up. But when you hit the Minneapolis Parks website, for some reason, you get this giant warning saying, if you encounter ICE, report it immediately to Minneapolis Parks. I'm sorry, in what world is this okay? And it goes higher than the Parks Department, by the way. It goes to the president of the city council. He's next. Commissioner Engelhardt is the one and the ringleader behind Defend 612. We finally know. Here he is. There you go. I have also found one of the leaders of Defend 612 is none other than Elliot Payne, the president of the Minneapolis City Council. Elliot Payne is the council president. Yes, I had to traverse into the deep blue abyss of blue sky for this, but here he is with State Senator Doran Clark of the DFL, which I think at this point almost should be considered a terrorist organization. So a sitting state senator is supporting a militant organization like Defend 612, which is putting citizens in harm's way. Good job, Doran Clark. Good frickin' job. And if you still don't believe me, they have lists of 2,900 plates of ICE agents, pictures of vehicles, and they've tracked them like 15 there, 19 there, all over the state of Minnesota. Do you not think there is something unhinged about this group? Really? Here's one of Defend 612 recent posts, and let me tell you, they have grown from 8,000 people on Instagram to 21,000. So there you have it, folks. We have state officials, city officials, celebrities funding a militant group of people that are putting U.S. citizens in danger. So what are your thoughts on this? Let me know in the comments. Common Sense Gay out.
Last video.
Let's talk about Renee Good and Alex Pretti, and let's get to the bottom of it. Both of those individuals were shot and killed in Minnesota, in fact, just within a couple of minutes and miles of each other. And Minnesota is important because, if you guys didn't know, just 9 counties across the entire country account for roughly 2/3 of all violent confrontations with ICE. You might be asking, what are those counties? Well, it's Newark, New York City, Chicago, Minneapolis, Denver, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle. And together, those 9 non-cooperating jurisdictions have seen 110 violent confrontations with ICE. Every other county in America, which is over 3,000 of them, have seen just 64 violent confrontations total. So what this means, mathematically speaking, is that a county in one of these top 9 jurisdictions is nearly 600 times more likely to experience a violent confrontation with ICE than any other of the 3,000 plus counties. Are we supposed to believe that is a coincidence, or are we supposed to observe a pattern here? Let's talk about who governs these places, which all function really as sanctuary cities. Chicago is run by Brandon Johnson, Los Angeles is run by Karen Bass, Minneapolis is run by Jacob Fry, New York is run by Zoran Mamdani, Portland by Keith Wilson, San Francisco by Daniel Lurie, Katie Wilson runs Seattle, Ross Baraka runs Newark, and Denver is run by Mike Johnston. Now, every single one of these cities is governed by politicians who take a staunchly adversarial posture towards ICE, publicly framing federal immigration enforcement as illegitimate, immoral, or an enemy force. That is important. Violent confrontations with ICE are rare in states and cities where local officials actually cooperate with federal law enforcement. That is a fact. It is observable. You can go look. ICE arrests more people in Texas, Florida, Virginia, Georgia, so many other states than it does in Minnesota by a wide margin. So the obvious question is, why aren't people being shot in those states? And spare me the idiocy that ICE agents are just roaming around looking to kill civilians or seeking violence. That claim collapses instantly when you look at where violence isn't happening. What is happening is this. In these 9 jurisdictions, political leaders implicitly and explicitly label ICE as the enemy. They encourage resistance, and they create an environment where people believe they are moral heroes for interfering with federal agents doing federal work that was democratically voted for in large numbers. Now, I want to be clear, because nuance is always an important thing to me. This does not mean that ICE is perfect. It does not mean that every use of force is justified. I've already said publicly that I do not believe the shooting of Alex Pretti was a good shooting. But what is stupid, and even worse, dangerous, is to pretend that when people insert themselves into volatile law enforcement operations, nothing bad could ever happen, that we shouldn't expect it to happen, and that responsibility always lies, and only lies, with the officers. The officer alone. And to all of the people who are going to make excuses, don't care. You know why? Because this isn't happening everywhere. It's happening in very specific places under very specific leadership with very predictable results.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, okay. You have a deputy governor. You have a senior person on Tim Walz' staff. You have the president of the Minnesota City Council. You have a sitting state senator. You have a Hollywood, an organization headed up by one of the stupidest fucking people alive, Mark Ruffalo. You have also got access to the license plate database. Like it's been said in one of the videos, the only way you would be able to get that is if you were having some cooperation from law enforcement, or were being in, or somebody in law enforcement is giving you access to it, or you have somebody cooperating and leaking the stuff in law enforcement. You've got coordination on a significantly large level. You have got funding. It's very clear that they've got funding on a fairly large scale. All of this, by the way, they don't really seem to care about the fact that they are protecting domestic abusers, illegal aliens, human traffickers, pedophiles, criminals. You know, they don't violent individuals, violent men of military. They don't seem to really care about that. This is not about illegal aliens. I'm going to say the word illegal aliens. They're not fucking undocumented. They're illegal aliens. Illegal aliens. And the whole thing about this is that it's like it's, allegedly, and again, we will be covering this on 479, that Trump has promised Tim Walz an unbiased investigation, or a fair and balanced investigation of the scenario. The whole thing is, though, is that, ultimately what it boils down to is that, again, had we been reliant on the mainstream media to cover this particular event, we would not have known about any of this. Like, none of it, right? Don Lemon would not have been exposed. Alex Pretti wouldn't have been Alex Pretti, it would have been Nicole Marie Good, would have been their new George Floyd. Like, there's a whole bunch of things that very, very clearly are being exposed here. And it's not just about the leering centers. It's not about the hospice care and whatnot, because this is starting to go out of state now. You're hearing stories about this taking place in Maine, another blue state. You're also seeing stories about this happening. Yeah, you might want to be sitting down on this one, California, right? I'm sure as this starts to go out, starts to spread out, you really need to understand that, that having Kamala Harris not get elected, the U.S. dodged a bullet. Like, I don't think the U.S. would have survived as a country had the Democrats won in 2024. Like, that's what it looks like to me. It's, well, you're seeing stuff everywhere. Let me just get into some of the stuff about Tim Walz. So not just beyond the fact that he's willing to send people out to die and go out and protect illegal aliens, robbers, domestic abusers, criminals, pedophiles, rather than accept the responsibility of his own actions. He's figured out that he's toast, right? He's figured out that he's definitely not going to be coming back in as governor the next time around. The lieutenant governor has been implicated via the Signal group. The head of one of his major campaign people on his last campaign has also been exposed. And yeah, by the way, that is not everything. You have also got the issue that happened around the No Kings protest, where this one Democrat who voted against Tim Walz ended up dead by somebody who made the claim that he was receiving orders from Tim Walz. That's the type of people that you're dealing with. You've also got the issue, and again, once they start looking, seek, and ye shall find, right? You've got the issue of Ilhan Omar investing in this winery, which does not seem to, it has a physical address, but when they check the physical address, there's nothing there. And it somehow went from a value of $15,000 to $1.5 million in just 1 year. So, and then you've also got the Attorney General, and you've got the mayor of Minnesota, and you've got the president of the town of the Minneapolis City Council, and you've got Mark Ruffalo, and you've got that 612, right? You've got a systematic system of corruption in place, and Trump is going to have to go in, or somebody inside federal government is going to have to go in and fix this. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, right? You might not like that being said, but unfortunately, it's true. He's stuff's got to happen. Like, stuff has absolutely got to happen here. And, just go, if you saw all of the videos, right, and it's like, yeah, like that is that's like, this is starting, this thing is starting to almost like octopus out into other parts of the United States. And that, I think, should really kind of disturb you. In fact, it should probably disturb you quite a bit. Yeah, corrupt as fuck and needs to be fixed. And it's like, yeah, it's again, right, things have ramped up again because ultimately Trump has the ability to ramp it up to the next level. And it looks, again, it's kind of hard to say because I haven't looked at it too closely. It looks like he might not have had to. But again, that is not for discussion today on this show. That will be discussed at some other point in time. But I mean, yeah. Oh, wow. Big topic. I'm kind of wondering what would have happened if there had been 2 or 3 other people on the show with me tonight and we had to discuss this in detail. So, yeah, I've pretty much talked myself out on this. I am going to move on to the next individual. And he's currently on screen right now, Ryan Wedding. Yes, Ryan Wedding was caught and arrested. Now, there's a couple of very interesting videos that I have on him. So let's just get right into those videos, shall we? In fact, you saw a little bit on the first one because I hit a video by accident. But yeah, let's just take a look at a little mini bio for Ryan James Wedding.
An Olympic snowboarder is now being described by the FBI as the modern-day Pablo Escobar, and he's still on the run. Today, Ryan Wedding is without a doubt one of the most dangerous criminals in the world, but back in the 90s, he was one of the most gifted young snowboarders in Canada. At 15, he made the Canadian national team with the hopes of one day competing in the Olympics. 5 years later in 2002, that dream came true, but he failed to medal and retired shortly after. Almost immediately, Ryan did a 180 and found much more success in drug trafficking. He went all in and set up a sprawling grow-op with more than 6,800 marijuana plants in British Columbia. The operation was pulling in over $10 million per year, but got busted in 2006. Luckily, Ryan wasn't present during the raid and avoided charges. Now, you'd think such a close call would make someone scale back or even quit, but not Ryan. Instead, he decided to go 10 times harder. 2 years later, he made his first international play, or so he thought. Ryan's plug turned out to be a U.S. informant who nailed him trying to purchase 24 kilos of cocaine in California. Ryan served 4 years in federal prison, but once again, this only fueled him. See, turns out that while incarcerated, Ryan brushed shoulders with seasoned veterans from the Mexican cartels and received something of a PhD in drug smuggling. They agreed to work together, but almost immediately after his release, he got caught again. Canada charged him with attempting to move 15 tons of cocaine, but rather than facing the charges, he fled to Mexico, where he studied directly under the leaders of the Sinaloa cartel. By the early 2020s, he'd been on the run for 5 years and his operation exploded. Listen to Pam Bondi describe the scale.
60 metric tons is approximately the weight of 40 standard cars.
Now, for reference, 60 metric tons is worth about $1 billion per year in sales. Ryan had become the largest distributor of cocaine in North America, and the operation worked like this. First, he struck a deal with a Canadian trucking company who would hide the drugs in secret compartments. The driver would finish his route in LA, where the drugs were either stashed or shipped to other US hubs. Now, he had a vast team of smugglers who helped him pull this off, but his second in command was this guy, Andrew Clark. These two were extremely dangerous. Prior to 2025, they'd executed 4 murders that we know of, but this year things got even more shocking. See, the US government had an informant who'd been working to bring Ryan down. Towards the end of 2024, he agreed to testify, as the US finally filed narcotics charges. After news broke, the informant fled to Colombia for safety, but Ryan found out and placed a bounty on his head. Sadly, someone in Ryan's network spotted the witness at a restaurant and shot him 5 times in the head. After the vicious murder, Ryan landed on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list, but he's still in the run as the FBI is now offering $15 million for information that leads to his arrest or conviction.
Well, he's not on the run anymore. I will say that right now. I got another video here. It's Kash Patel talking about him. Come on. There we go. Kash Patel talking about him. Yeah, he's been arrested, by the way. But just watch the video.
And none of this would be possible without the tremendous leadership of Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice and our partners and prosecutors at the United States Attorney's Office here in LA and our Los Angeles field office. Here you'll see many of our brave partners, including the Commissioner of the RCMP, the Chief of Police of the LAPD, our LA field office, ADIC, along with our partners from DEA and CBP and more. This is what a united front looks like. And just to tell you how bad of a guy Ryan Wedding is, he went from an Olympic snowboarder to the largest narco trafficker in modern times. He is a modern-day El Chapo. He is a modern-day Pablo Escobar. And he thought he could evade justice. But these brave men and women put together a prosecution package, put together an investigative package, put together an operations strategy. And here we are today, bringing him to justice for trafficking hundreds of kilos of cocaine and also for the murder of innocent civilians. This individual and his organization and the Sinaloa cartel poured narcotics into the streets of North America and killed too many of our youth and corrupted too many of our citizens. And that ends today. I also want to have a tremendous shout out to the government of Mexico. President Sheinbaum, Secretary Harfuch, and the military and law enforcement officers of Mexico worked hand in glove with our teams on the ground there to apprehend last night in Mexico City, Ryan Wedding. I was privileged to be there on a previously planned.
So, yeah, Ryan Wedding was apprehended. Here is the rather ironic, strange part about it. How did Ryan Wedding get caught? Well, as careful as he was not careful enough. He posted up pictures of himself on vacation and told on that same apparently social media that he was going to be going back to Mexico City. So they knew where he was. Yeah, I've actually got another video posted up of him on I think everywhere except for BitChute and Rumble at this point, and the video will be going up with that. They might even actually be posted up there as well. This is just me, and I'm going to have to go into the realm of speculation here. I am going to refer to this event kind of almost in the same way that I would refer to, say, individuals that I know who ended up having criminal backgrounds or ended up getting involved in crime later on. Now, the ones that I remember growing up that did this, who got involved in crime later on, there was a consistent pattern of behavior with all of them, a tendency and a willingness to use violence, usually also a bit of a lazy, I won't say lazy streak, but a way of making fast and taking a faster, easier way to get to where you wanted to go, as opposed to actually having to grind it out and say, like, do what I do, and almost like literally rebuild from zero when my YouTube got shut down and have to rebuild my sub count past 1,000 again. That type of thing, right? I'm almost willing to bet that, when he was on the Canadian national snowboard team, right? And by the way, I'm actually even I'm even going to go even further back. I am willing to bet that even when as a kid, he was probably a bit of a bully. He was probably not somebody, probably a bit of a thug and a goon, because he was probably one of the big kids, even back in elementary school and high school. I'm going to bet that there was a fair number, either near misses or a fair number of fights that he got in. He was probably not necessarily the most popular guy in high school. In fact, he was probably noted as being untrustworthy. Maybe even had some close calls with authorities. even as a kid. This is just me speculating here. Now, unlike a lot of other kids, he actually possessed phenomenal talent. And he would, I'm like, again, I'm going to have to get into the realm of speculation here. I'm going to speculate that in terms of actual raw, pure talent in the snowboarding field, much more was expected of Ryan. He was probably the one who kept showing up late for practice. He was the one who would show up hungover. He would be the one that would potentially, again, have those near brushes or those near misses with the law, physical altercations, that type of thing, even with the snowboard community, probably ultimately not necessarily the most popular guy on the team. I'm going to throw that one out there. Had a reputation for taking the softer, easier way out. There may have even been some speculation from some of the coaches on the snowboard team, or maybe even from the captain on the snowboard team, that maybe hold on a second. That maybe they should get rid of him, but it's like, he was probably and occasionally he would have some flashes of just absolute brilliance. And, he would just have so much talent that, that trying to remove him from the team and replacing him with someone else may have been difficult, right? But he's always looking for the fast, easy way as opposed to actually having to apply himself. Hence, when it came to the Olympics, he was good enough to make the team, but he was not good enough to win because he wasn't willing, again, in this particular area, he wasn't willing to put in the work to make himself a potential contender, despite the fact that he absolutely, positively, probably had a shit ton of fucking talent, right? Finished 22nd in the 2002 Olympics. Probably wasn't really that old at that point. He was still in his early 20s. I mean, he probably still had, ideally, probably maybe even 10 years of snowboarding, maybe even probably less, but somewhere between 5 and 10 more years of snowboarding. If he had applied himself, he probably could have maybe gotten up to the podium, but he chose not to do that. Why? Because individuals like this guy want the fast and easy way out, and they are willing to cheat to do it. And potentially either incredibly narcissistic or a psychopath and didn't really care. Again, right? One of the other things you probably, if you start talking to some of the people who knew him when he was a snowboarder on the snowboard team, probably will tell you that he was maybe even really fucking scary when he was drunk. Like, really scary. That's a sign, right? Probably had, and again, right, this is gonna be very hard to prove, but probably potentially even some weird, not particularly healthy sexual fetishes, right? There's a lot of stuff going on here. So, I mean, yeah, it takes a certain type of again, right? I have read some books on people who have tried to get into the who have worked in the drug field. The money is really good, and almost everybody is certainly willing to take risks once or twice to do it. It's an out of this world paycheck, right? You make a lot of money, and it's like, it solves a lot of problems, especially short term, right? Look at that the Mule by Clint Eastwood, right? he kept making he got addicted to the money. But I mean, initially he was just interested in making a few bucks to help solve a problem that he was in, and he just kept going. So I mean, it is possible that that he was maybe the good kid that just kind of made some bad decisions. In my experience, though, and I'm going with, and again, right, my lived experience is not necessarily the yardstick that you might want to go by, but the individuals that I knew that engaged in this type of, who went this route, showed clear and evident signs that they were going to go this route long before they ever were. And it's like, again, right, I would be very, very curious to go and interview members of the snowboard team, both the men's and the women's and the coaches, and get some interactions with them and to ask them some very specific pointed questions. Like, did he get weird when he got drunk? Did you have instances where he tried to take shortcuts or do stuff that was maybe skirting the law or maybe even outright breaking it? Was he the guy that got you your drugs? Was he the guy who potentially maybe had a couple of instances where, in hindsight, he may have been charged with a sex crime? Did he get really creepy when he was high or drunk? Right? Did he have a tendency to get into fights? Right? Was he the type of guy that would show up late for practice? Was so good that, even when he showed up late, occasionally you would see something where he would just absolutely rock it. Right? Like that sort of thing. Because, I seriously doubt that he just kind of stumbled into this type of behavior. The people who got involved in this type of thing were usually leaning that way in the first place. And yeah, I can think of, right off the top of my head, I can think of 4 or 5 people that I grew up, including one, by the way, an individual by the name of Bindi Johal, who graduated from a different high school than I did in Vancouver. But even as a kid in high school, for instance, we all heard about when he kicked that principal at the school that he was in the nuts. Like, everybody in East Van heard about that. So he had a bit of a reputation for being like that from the beginning. And, it's, yeah, I don't think Ryan Wedding just kind of stumbled into this, right? And yeah, well, I hate to say this, but he actually did kind of live up to his potential, just not in a good way, which is kind of tragic. And it is very, very tragic how it happened, right? He's probably, he might get out of jail when he's an old man, but he's going to be an old, broken man. He lived hard. He's going to die not very well. Maybe he was smart enough to tuck some money away somewhere so he can retire quietly after he gets out of prison. But he ain't going to be getting out of prison. He might get life. I don't think he's going to get a death sentence, but he's probably going to get life. And even if he does, right, there's absolutely no guarantee that the RCMP is not going to want to have a crack at him as well. So, yeah, actions equal consequences. I'd like to feel sorry for Ryan Wedding, but he contributed to a problem that he made the situation even worse than what it already is. And he was probably also ideally suited to be the drug smuggler during the Biden administration when the borders were fast and loose and a lot less strictly enforced than they are now. Right? That changed under Trump. And it's like, and it's like, again, right, I've heard stories about them saying, oh, yeah, there's a significant drop off in the number of deaths from drug related issues. And I can believe that. So, Ryan Wedding, very unlikely you're going to see this. And I don't really feel like going in and digging into your past, but I seriously doubt that this was just like you just kind of stumbled into this. You were probably that type of a person from the start. And you always were. And there are probably people all the way from elementary school, all the way up on the snowboard team, right, that are like looking at this and going, no, actually, no. Now that I think about it, it's probably not that big of a surprise at all that he ended up where he ended up. Because it's not. Right? It's not, right? Think about it. If you're an older guy and you're listening, older person, you're listening to this, right? The people that you grew up with that are now in jail, that ended up working as professional criminals, right? When you look back growing up with them and you start to look at their behavior, it's like, oh, yeah, Jesus, it is so obvious. And it's not just like that kid with a short fucking temper. And because there's another guy that was like this, that has a short temper, but actually had some morals and some principles and just fell into addiction. That's different, right? Like this is a different ball game altogether. So Ryan Wedding, you got what you deserved. And I'm going to move on to the last topic of the night. This, by the way, is the big old Manosphere topic. And I found out about it via this. This photo you're seeing right here, right now, appeared on my Instagram feed. It's weird how these photos, and I'm probably going to be doing, if I could squeeze it in tomorrow, I will do it. I will have to do a full-fledged response to this video, to this particular article. The Manosphere isn't even having fun. Guess who wrote this? Magdalene Taylor. Really short. Again, something like, like as I'm going through this, right? First of all, each of the questions tied themselves together in the most miserable form this weekend, as several of the internet's most controversial Manosphere figures came together for a reason. For an evening of bad dating advice, gender war manufacturing, and anti-Semitism. It's like, Jesus fucking Christ, man. The video released over Martin Luther King Day included Andrew and Tristan Tate, Nick Fuentes, Clavicular, and other Manosphere figures were seen partying across penthouses, limos, nightclubs, talking down to and about women while blasting Kanye West. That's like, wow. Okay, first of all, I got to point this out. Myron Gaines is very critical about the government of Israel. That does not make him an actual anti-Semite, right? Again, not overly surprised. By the way, I'm going to point this out. Like, Magdalene Taylor is not a, you want to talk about somebody who's going to do a balanced report on the Manosphere. Leave it up to a woman working for Playboy magazine to do it. All right, and also, let's just start out right away. I know that there are Jews in the Manosphere. I know because I've spoken to them, right? Nick Fuentes is not a member of the Manosphere. Clavicular has been talked about. He's into looks maxing. I've heard his name dropped, but he's not really. And it's like, again, right? Like, given the fact that Andrew and Tristan Tate are half black and Myron Gaines, which, by the way, you'll notice that she completely left that fact out, is black, and that Clavicular is not actually a member of the Manosphere. Like, yeah, like you notice that she left that stuff out. By the way, I will be doing a more in-depth study about this. The videos, which also included streamer Sneeko as well as influencer Justin Waller, among others. Again, Sneeko and Justin Waller are not really guys tied into this. Sneeko is a grifter. Justin Waller, not really, also not a guy that's like super involved, among others. We're ostensibly forced to be kind of brag. It's like, again, right? Like I've been around a lot of guys in the Manosphere. There's not a lot of brag or an elite like Manosphere hangout type situation. I mean, that might be the case with the PUAs, but I can't see, for instance, I cannot see guys like, say, Hammerhand and Terrence Pop involved in this. Maybe Rolo Tomasi, maybe the guys in the PUA community. But really, these youths were awkwardly standing around nightclub, preening, competing for some sort of made-up masculinity. The result of this vile, hateful display of, again, right? Like, what are these examples of anti-Semitism? Again, like, explain to me how it is that Myron Gaines and, say, Andrew Tristan Tate, who are half black, would be engaged in anti-Semitism. And again, right? It's like you want to talk about with a woman like, say, Madeline Taylor, it's going to be misogyny. And of course, it's like, oh, well, none of it looks like it's any fun. Well, let's focus on instead of the pseudo-philosophizing why women aren't worth their time, performing heterosexual masculinity as proximity, dating them, sleeping with them, simply having them around. In other words, liking women. But this layer of the Manosphere, other men are apparently the priority. Again, right? Notice the gay suggestion here. The only reason to have women is to prove how little you desire them. That's not Andrew Tate. That's not Clavicular. That is not the PUA. I cannot picture MGTOWs being at this event. Nick Fuentes, Myron Gaines, the Nick Fuentes for sure. Clavicular would not have been. This sounds like she's taking it out of custody. The goal is to not look good for women, but to look good to each other in some sort of again, that this is a female point of view with no tangible reward besides anonymous internet users where they I've heard of mogging. It's not a fucking Meg touch him. The only visual scene actually interesting with this weekend's video was Clavicular, a relatively new figure. The Manosphere known for newsmaxing. He was derided by the other. Of course, Clavicular is not very popular inside the Manosphere. I don't know why the fuck he was even there. And of course, you've got this. Again, I will do more on this later. Bros in a room. Andrew Tate, Nick Fuentes, Tristan Tate, Myron. Again, like, explain to me again, please, how it is that the Tates who are half black and Myron Gaines and his partner on the show who are black would be, again, right? I have to keep saying this, right? Being critical of the government of Israel does not make you anti-Semitic. And is distracted by a random hoe. One engagement farming wrote an extra. This is why controlling lust is important. Well, it is important in controlling lust. It is, right? You need to take charge of your sexuality. I would explain that to Magdalene, but it would be a waste of time, right? Historically, part of the heterosexual proximity dating of simply having them around. I was liking what's apparently the only The goal is to not look good, but to look good for each other. So again, that's a female tangible word beyond the mogged. It was derided by but to look good for each other, to grab no tangible word besides anonymous. They mogged each other. The only individual actual. Okay, yeah, we're going to talk about clavicular butt control later at night. Fuentes, who has insisted he is attracted to him, practically begged clavicular not to bring women around. Okay. Nick Fuentes, again, I'm not super familiar with him. I know of him. He is not a member of the Manosphere. I don't know why the hell he would be down there with Myron Gaines and Andrew Tate. Maybe he does get along with them. I have seen Nick Fuentes say some really apparently Nick Fuentes has said some really harsh stuff about the Manosphere. Yeah, that Nick Fuentes is not a member of the Manosphere. Meanwhile, Waller, and again, a guy I don't very explained it, don't know very much about, explained to Clavicular why he'd never take a woman out on a dinner date. A one-on-one dinner with a woman is a mistake and a waste of time and money, said Waller. 3 hours of bullshit. Clavicular responded, yeah, well, again, right. It's about being true to your purpose. It seems worth reminding of ostensibly straight men that engage again with the fucking suggestion that this is somehow homosexual. Like, this seems to be a really big thing with women that are critical about the Manosphere. Again, I will be doing a much more in-depth breakdown of this later on. Engaging heterosexually is supposed to be a good time and, enjoying a meal and conversation is more intimate than an act in the bedroom. It is normal, healthy to be around masculine interest in other men. Again, right? The suggestion that somehow brotherhood is somehow like latently homosexual, right? Like, this is, to be more interested in hot young women sitting up than networking with other men whose only real claim to pushing it's not an ideological circle jerk again, right? You got to ask her to prove this sort of stuff. Many of us who have seen this video, whether these men actually are just gay and closeted. Well, you certainly implied it a few times, but I'm unsure it's quite so simple. They could just easily craft a masculine persona and Jesus fucking Christ. You knew this was coming. Plenty of men managed to do so without being hateful. But what this corner of the Manosphere displayed over the weekend has little to do with sex at all. In this world of modeling their anti-woman masculinity for the camera, they're putting on a show of so-called manliness that is entirely detached from the reality of being a straight guy. Well, tell me, Madeline, what is the reality of being a straight guy? Kind of curious about that. They're so wrapped up in the deluded image that they can't even enjoy what should be the spoils of being the type of macho guy they claim to be. It's not about being fucking macho. Wow. Man, I am having a hard time keeping my tongue in check around this because, I can say I'm going to have to do a more in-depth thing. Nobody involved in this unit is having fun. Not the men in the videos, not the women that somehow are willing to be around them, especially not the young men who idolize and lurk in Discord servers that encourage them to take on their antagonists. Again, finding your purpose and dedicating yourself to it is not an antagonistic way of thinking, right? It is an antagonistic way of thinking if you are doing it and it's basically taking you off the plantation, which they don't want men to be doing. And it's here that the Manosphere is beginning to fall apart. Oh, magical thinking. Holy shit, magical thinking. The Manosphere is falling apart, which is why it's larger than it's ever been, ever. The Manosphere is falling apart, which is why it's on the verge of gaining it was becoming to the point where potentially in this year's midterms, Republicans in close polls are actually going to start talking about men's issues. It's so insignificant that you saw that feminists have had to ramp up their hateful rhetoric, which I've done 3 whole videos on some of the stuff that they've done, right? Again, there are already signs that this political sway of the Manosphere is losing its shine. magical thinking again. With approval ratings of Trump among young men, again, wrong. Part of it is why it all looked like such a bad time over the weekend, too, is because there are rifts among the online figures of the Manosphere itself. Andrew Tate, for example, called Sneeko a crybaby. Well, Sneeko's not a member of the Manosphere. He's a fucking grifter and a slime bag. At least that's my opinion of him. Following these guys don't like women. They really don't even like each other. Well, again, right, male tribal. Again, it's, oh, fuck. I cannot wait to do the actual full bore teardown of this. This entire spectacle laid forth a fundamental reality about the Manosphere that has never been a brotherhood about improving men or masculinity, but a competition with no real reward. Perhaps all this is a reason for some hope. Those who remain obsessed with guys like Tate and Waller may continue on, but eventually the thin bonds of community they found admiring them online will dissolve. Oh, fuck. Wow. Man, I got nothing. Man, I just, again, right? Female closeted suggestions that they're gay, leaving out specific and important details in this particular article, knowingly and willingly, by the way, leaving particular and specific details out. In reading this, and by the way, there's also a video on this, which I'm going to have to download and I'm going to have to do a teardown on. Should have expected that a woman like Magdalene Taylor would write something like this. Can't really say that I'm overly surprised that this happened. And, man, like multiple claims that there's multiple claims, and I'm seeing this happen more and more because, I mean, like they cannot, even though there's actually like a TV show called Band of Brotherhood and the bonds that develop between men striving towards a similar goal together is a bond of brotherhood, and it's not some fucking gay homosexual fucking bullshit issue. It's like they really want, there's obviously a faction right now that really wants anything male to be emasculated, right? And they want these guys to be emasculated, and that's exactly what they were attempting to do. Like I say, when I do the video review of this, which hopefully will be later on today, right? I'll be able to do a little bit more of a full review. But while this is not the worst article I have seen about the Manosphere, it is definitely up there. Again, right, like you either get it or you don't. Nick Fuentes has a dedication to being chaste. I totally get that. Clavicular is not a member of the Manosphere. Yes, Myron Gaines in particular is very critical of the government of Israel. That does not, and again, right, they try to throw in the suggestion here that these guys are possibly white supremacists, which is going to be a very hard thing to do when Andrew and Tristan Tate are half black and Myron Gaines is black himself. Again, right, like this is not the first time. Like again, clavicular is also not really a member of the Manosphere. And again, there's various factions and whatnot. And again, right, like there's probably other guys in the Manosphere that are probably going to take this article apart, But yeah, racism, anti-Semitism, misogyny, closeted gay, engagements of hypocrisy, putting labels on guys who are not in the Manosphere and saying that they are part of the Manosphere, right? But the part with that I found was really interesting about this is like that is falling apart. No, that it's getting bigger, right? And it's getting bigger, and as it gets bigger, those groups, those tribes break off into smaller tribes. For instance, MGTOW was at one point tied in with the MRM, right? And it kind of like broke off and became its own thing, right? And then you have the Black Pill, which is an amalgamation between the Red Pill and MGTOW and that kind of thing. And then you've got IBMOR, which is a African-American version of MGTOW, and so on and so on and so on, right? Tribalism is an innate fact with men. It is, and it's, it's like, again, explaining it to an idiot like Magdalene Taylor is just a waste of fucking time. Do not contact this idiot. Don't bother explaining anything to her. She is not really, in all honesty, she is not really all that interested in knowing the truth. This article will be gone and forgotten. There will probably be a few other people that will give her responses down the road, but ultimately I don't think this article is really worth his time. There was a few people on Instagram that were praising it. I got a couple of upvotes at my end. I also will point out one more thing before I call it a night here, and that is that Playboy is actually on the corporate flag of America. And yeah, Playboy has done some really stupid things, like not like removing the nude centerfold, which would just like left me just scratching my head, right? Again, right? Probably are going to be, because this article came out 8 days ago. Yeah, there are probably going to be a few responses, which, by the way, if Magdalene Taylor, and I'm going to go on the record to say this, Magdalene Taylor will not respond to any of her critics. If she does, it'll be, oh, I'm not triggered. Or it'll be some fucking snarky response, right? Or some of her friends will engage in snarky response, but they won't give a proper response to an article like this. They never do, right? Laugh at it. Magdalene Taylor, there's a possibility, and you definitely will. I mean, I've got to say there's probably it's a reasonably fair chance that you're going to actually see, when I get around to doing the response to this, possibly even as early as this afternoon, to this, that you might see it, and it's like, yeah, like, you didn't strike a blow. You didn't hurt anything. You didn't stop anything, and engaging in wishful thinking or magical thinking and hoping that somehow, simply saying something makes it true doesn't make it true. And in respect to that, I am going to post up, instead of doing the Red Pill Nation show, I'm going to post up the MGTOW symbol to end this show. And I'm going to wish you all a good night. And I'm going to come out with the Inserted 2 by Anna Ekstrom and Anna Dager. And that will be, oh, wait, there's still one other thing I got to show you. That's right, this one. And then I'm going to call it a night.
Hey, remember when Charlie Kirk got shot and people realized that Google Analytics has a feature you can use to see what people have searched around an event, and that someone discovered that people were searching Charlie Kirk's death before the day that he was actually shot. Remember that? And remember all of those other major events that you can also look on Google Analytics, and you can see that people were searching that same very thing before the event even happened. Well, a new one was just discovered. In the last 90 days, Israel has had a spike of 100 or more people searching the term you can see at the top, Disneyland terrorist. Here's another one, 100 people or more that have searched ISIS attacks Disneyland. And here's another one, Disneyland bombing. Over 100 people have searched that in the last 90 days in the country of Israel. And here's another one in the last 90 days by the nation of Israel, Disneyland attacks. It's awesome that they've managed to leave this tool up for people to use by Google, because it's going to be the downfall, or at least we're going to be able to disrupt a lot of these plans. Now, we may not be able to stop these things from happening, but hopefully we can maybe deter them from actually wanting to do it. If this still happens, if anything happens at Disneyland anytime in the near future, remember this video, save it, share it with other people. I promise you, they're either going to not do it anymore because people have found out the method to discovering this stuff, or it's going to happen and they're going to say, it was just a coincidence. But you can see from these slides that they're trying to frame it as a Muslim-run attack on the U.S. They're trying to draw us into another Middle Eastern war, and hopefully we're not dumb enough to fall for it this time.
And with that, I will bring you up to Incertitude by Anna Extra and Anna Dager, the closing video, the closing music.